The atmosphere inside the Smackdown arena was electric, one of those nights when the energy in the crowd felt heavier than the lights above them. The fans could feel something was about to erupt. Paul Heyman, dressed in his usual expensive suit, walked down the aisle with a smug grin, clutching his phone and whispering into it as Solo Sikoa followed closely behind. The wise man of the bloodline had a certain calm that was unnerving. The night before, rumors had circulated that someone was returning, someone from Heyman's past, but the mastermind appeared unbothered, even confident. In the ring, Heyman addressed the WWE Universe with that same mix of arrogance and fearlessness that had defined his entire career. His words slithered through the microphone. He spoke of loyalty, dominance, and power. He declared that the bloodline had crushed every threat, that no legend, past or present, could ever challenge their throne again. Solo Sikoa stood beside him, arms folded, eyes cold, a silent wall of menace. The fans booed, but Heyman thrived on it. Then it happened. The lights dimmed. The crowd stirred. That familiar sound of heavy breathing, the mechanical echoes that once signaled destruction, filled the arena. Then, boom, Bautista's theme hit. The explosion of energy that followed was indescribable. The crowd erupted to their feet as the animal Bautista emerged from the smoke, dressed in black leather, sunglasses hiding his fury, his muscles looking sharper than ever. The look on Heyman's face told the story. His smirk evaporated, his phone dropped from his hand, and his composure vanished into panic. Bautista didn't rush. He took slow, deliberate steps down the ramp, eyes locked on Heyman. Every step was a statement. Every glance toward the fans was a reminder of who he was, one of the most dominant forces in WWE history. The animal had returned, not for nostalgia, not for show, but for vengeance. Heyman tried to laugh it off, telling Solo something, but Solo didn't move. Even the Samoan enforcer seemed unsure what to do. Bautista entered the ring, circled Heyman like a predator assessing his prey. The crowd chanted his name, shaking the arena to its core. Heyman tried to reason. He extended his hand, smiling nervously, talking about mutual respect and old alliances. But Bautista wasn't there for peace. He stared at Heyman, every muscle in his body trembling with restrained rage. For years, Heyman had manipulated, betrayed, and profited off men like Bautista, warriors who bled while he schemed. Bautista had seen it all before. He reminded Heyman, in no uncertain terms, that this wasn't about the bloodline. This was about payback. About the time Heyman backed Brock Lesnar against him, about the years of disrespect, about the way Heyman had built empires by using others as stepping stones. Heyman tried to backtrack, claiming he was merely an advisor and that the bloodline was now in charge, not him. He said he was just a humble servant of greatness. But Bautista stepped forward, his chest barely an inch from Heyman's trembling face. The tension could have cut through steel. Solo finally stepped between them, but Bautista didn't flinch. The animal's eyes darted past Solo's shoulder, right back to Heyman. The crowd roared again as Bautista raised his arm, signaling that old familiar gesture, the setup for a spinebuster. Heyman screamed out for mercy, his voice cracking in terror. But before Bautista could grab him, Solo struck, slamming a forearm into Bautista's jaw. The fight exploded. Bautista stumbled but came back swinging. The arena shook as the two titans collided. Solo hit Bautista with a series of body shots, but the animal absorbed them and fired back with crushing punches that echoed through the building. The fans were on their feet, screaming as Bautista hoisted Solo and drove him into the corner. Heyman rolled out of the ring, screaming for help, yelling into his phone for security, for anyone from the bloodline to intervene. But no one came. Bautista was alone with Solo, and he was unleashing years of pent-up fury. A massive clothesline sent Solo over the top rope, crashing to the floor. The crowd chanted louder. Heyman's face went ghost white. Bautista turned slowly, locking eyes again with Heyman. The wise man tried to escape through the barricade, but Bautista was faster. He grabbed Heyman by the collar and dragged him back toward the ring. The fans went insane, chanting Spinebuster at the top of their lungs. Bautista looked down at the terrified manager and said only one thing, "You made this happen." Heyman's pleas fell on deaf ears. Bautista lifted him, but before he could strike, Solo reappeared, steel chair in hand, and slammed it across Bautista's back. The animal roared in pain but didn't fall. He turned, fury in his eyes, grabbed the chair from Solo, and hurled it out of the ring. Another thunderous spear sent Solo crashing to the mat. Bautista's adrenaline was uncontrollable. But Heyman used the moment to crawl away, escaping up the ramp, clutching his jacket and shouting into his phone again, desperate for help. Bautista stood tall in the ring, breathing heavily, the crowd chanting his name like a war drum. When the cameras cut backstage later that night, Heyman was seen pacing in his office, furious and shaken. Solo sat beside him, bruised but stoic. Heyman promised revenge, his words filled with venom. "No one humiliates Paul Heyman," he muttered. "No one touches the bloodline and lives to brag about it." But the show wasn't over. Before the closing segment, as Heyman was seen trying to leave the building, the lights went dark once again. The arena screens flickered to life, showing Bautista standing in the parking lot beside his car, staring directly into the camera. He promised that this was just the beginning. The message was clear, the legend had returned to destroy the manipulator who built his empire on others' backs. The following week, Heyman appeared with bandages around his wrist, still visibly shaken. He cut another promo, trying to rewrite the narrative, claiming Bautista's actions were unprovoked. He called Bautista a has-been, a man chasing ghosts. But the crowd wasn't buying it. The fans booed louder than ever, chanting, "You got scared." Heyman tried to silence them, but the jeers drowned him out. Then, the Titantron came to life again, Bautista training in a dark gym, lifting weights with fury, sweat pouring down his face. He spoke about how Heyman had ruined careers, how he had corrupted the sport he once loved. Bautista wasn't back for a short stint, he was back for war. By the time the next Smackdown arrived, Heyman had surrounded himself with protection. Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and even Jacob Fatu stood by his side. But despite the army, there was fear in Heyman's eyes. He knew Bautista wasn't just a physical threat, he was a force of nature. Midway through the show, a backstage segment showed security footage of Bautista's car pulling into the lot. Heyman panicked instantly, yelling for Solo to find him. But when Solo reached the parking area, the car was empty. Bautista had already slipped inside the building. The hunt was on. Throughout the night, cameras caught glimpses of Bautista stalking the corridors, the crowd roaring every time he appeared on screen. Finally, near the end of the show, Heyman tried to sneak out the back with his guards. But the door slammed shut behind him. The lights flickered again. Bautista stepped from the shadows. The guards attacked first. Bautista crushed them with brutal precision, spinebusters, clotheslines, slams that shook the walls. Solo charged at him with a steel pipe, but Bautista dodged, countered, and drove him into a stack of crates. The animal had snapped. Heyman was cornered. The camera zoomed in on his terrified face as Bautista approached, silent but deadly. Heyman tried to plead, offering money, alliances, anything. But Bautista only smirked. He grabbed Heyman's tie, pulled him close, and whispered that line again, "You made this happen." Before doing more damage, security finally swarmed in, dragging Bautista away. The fans erupted into chants of "let them fight," but officials managed to separate them. Heyman collapsed to the floor, clutching his chest, his empire shaken to its core. The final shot of Smackdown that night was haunting, Bautista being dragged out of the arena, still glaring at Heyman, shouting that he would see him at Crown Jewel. The fallout was massive. Triple H ordered an emergency meeting, suspending Bautista for 1 week but hinting that a match was inevitable. Heyman, furious yet visibly shaken, demanded protection and warned that Bautista's return was a mistake the WWE Universe will regret. The next week, Heyman returned again, surrounded by guards, claiming Bautista had violated WWE conduct. He spoke about legal action, about restraining orders, but every word sounded like fear disguised as control. Then, out of nowhere, Bautista appeared on the Titantron again, smiling this time, calm, but with that dangerous intensity in his eyes. He promised that the next time they met, there would be no interruptions, no guards, and no escape. The animal versus the manipulator, the inevitable showdown was coming. And the WWE Universe could only chant 3 words: feed him. Heyman. Smackdown had been shaken to its core. Paul Heyman had faced legends before, but never like this. Never an animal this hungry, this focused, this determined. Bautista's return wasn't a nostalgia act, it was a reckoning. Every shadow backstage felt like a threat to Heyman now. Every sound made him flinch. And every roar from the crowd reminded him that the man he once underestimated was coming for everything he stood for. When the credits rolled that night, fans around the world knew the truth: Paul Heyman had just met the one man who wasn't afraid of his empire. And for the first time in years, the wise man had no wisdom left to save himself.